All right, so I'll pick up here. I believe, honestly, that we've already covered this, but I just want to be 100% sure because it could have been some points that I didn't make previously. So achievement motivation was first defined by psychologist Henry Murray in 1938. And what achievement motivation is, as it's stated there, is for you to a desire, a drive for someone to acquire a significant accomplishment, if not the accomplishment itself, a mastery of some type of skill or idea, or create something at a very high level. Really, this person functions at a very high level in everything that they do. So in their job, they may have a position that's kind of the top position. In their lives, they may have a business. If they're doing entrepreneurship, that's a very lucrative business. If they're competing as an athlete, they are going to be like a top, well-known athlete. Whatever this person does, they do it at a high level. And so that's what achievement motivation is. A lot of times, achievement motivation is closely related to, or even given as an example for achievement motivation, is like education. With education, when the person is acquiring mastery for a skill or idea, that comes through knowledge. And typically when we are mastering something, when we're going at a higher level, or when we're trying to go past the kind of what's considered the standard, we see that a lot in education. So a person that has achievement motivation, high school diploma is great, but a person that has achievement motivation would feel like that's just the bare minimum standard. That's just kind of what they need to get to the next level. They would get an associate's, okay, but the associates wouldn't be the highest level. This person would then sign up to get their bachelor's. After they do that, that's not enough. They would go forward to get their master's. Their master's is not enough. They would go then forward to get their doctorate degree, because that's the highest level. And so that's just kind of an example of how achievement motivation works. But again, I gave you other examples of how this could be related to if a person plays sports, where one person trains for 2 hours, this person is going to train for 5 or 6 hours, because they have a very high standard that they set for themselves, and how they project that onto society as well. All right, so that is achievement motivation. Under high motivation achievers, there are some terms I want you to be familiar with. Well, I'm sorry, one term in particular that I want you to be familiar with, and that's going to be, two terms, grit and intrinsic motivation. And you may remember we talked about intrinsic motivation before, but let me talk about grit first. So grit, with a high achiever, grit is that part in a person that they possess, that they are going to be passionate, and they're going to persevere through any situation to achieve what they have desired to achieve. So the definition for grit is, in psychology, it involves passion and perseverance in the pursuit of long-term goals. And with grit, this isn't the person just working hard. This person is working hard through some very difficult situations, some very difficult life situations that they have not let lock them down or knock them down. They just continue to push forward no matter what. This is that person that digs for that very little ounce of energy that they have remaining. They're going to give everything they have. They don't care about the obstacles. That is typically a characteristic of a person that has achievement motivation, because no matter what, they're going to achieve their goal, no matter what gets in their way. And so they possess grit. Intrinsic motivation, once again, is the motivation to do something or be motivated to acquire something, simply because of your love for it. So for instance, and you're not looking for any gain, you're not looking for any reward, you're not looking for any compliments related to it. So let's say you have a person that just loves baking. They may bake 10 cakes, and they'll give all the cakes away. And another person may say, well, why don't you sell those cakes? Those are really great cakes that you bake. I just love baking the cakes. That's intrinsic motivation. They do it for themselves. They do it for simply the love of it. They're not looking for any reward in response to whatever that is, okay? This would be like a guy that plays basketball every single day. He's not looking to get in the league. He's not looking to join a team. He just loves the game of basketball. He loves to actually play, not looking for any rewards behind it. So be familiar with achievement motivation, grit, and intrinsic motivation. All right, here, and I'll try to blow this up a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. Here's where we're talking about the physiology of hunger and how we are, and the reason why it's there is because we are motivated to eat. One of our basic physiological needs that must be met is food and water. And so we need those for just basic survival. So that's the basic necessities that we need. So this is why hunger is a part of motivation. So in this experiment, you have A.L. Washburn. This is the person that's actually swallowing a balloon. And Walter Cannon, they created this experiment because what they wanted to see or kind of figure out was what exactly triggers hunger. And typically what we think triggers hunger is our stomach, like hunger pains or like our stomach is growling or something of that nature. So in this experiment, A.L. Washburn, he swallows the balloon, and the balloon has a device in it which is going to measure or kind of note the contractions that the stomach is having because he's hungry. And based on those measurements, he can kind of see, okay, well, this is an indication, this is an indicator that you're hungry, okay? And so every time he feels hungry, he presses the button to kind of see how that correlates with his stomach contractions, which we would call hunger pains, and the actual feeling of hunger. And so what he was trying to do was see, okay, is the stomach the only indicator that tells us we're hungry? Or are there other indicators in the body that also trigger hunger? And so what they did was, after they kind of tested him doing the stomach contractions, measuring that, what they did was they took a rat, they did research on rats to determine, okay, if we remove the stomach, then how can the rat know that it's hungry and not just basically die from not having those survival needs met? Well, we have other ways, our body has other ways of telling us that we're hungry, which takes us to the body chemistry and the brain and the physiology of hunger. So glucose, this is one trigger of hunger, okay? What glucose does, or what it is, a form of sugar that circulates in the blood and provides the major source of energy for body tissues. And so guess what? With glucose, if those levels are low, that's a trigger for hunger. That doesn't have anything to do with the hunger pains. So that's one indicator that we're hungry. Our glucose level drops. Another is the set point, all right? The set point is considered the body's weight thermostat, all right? And so our set point is typically set on a particular weight. And so when the body falls below that weight, the hunger arousal is increased. And then our metabolism is lowered, and then it causes us to lose weight. That's another indicator, all right? And then lastly, we have the basal metabolic rate. This is the body's resting rate of energy expenditure. So this is when our body is at rest and not exerting any energy. And when that drops, we will feel hungry as well, all right? So this is also a good indicator of how those that may have had stomach cancer or have stomach cancer and had their stomachs removed, how they know or how they're prompted to eat so that they don't, basically die of starvation, because they have these other indicators. All right, and as we continue, it takes us to some hormones. okay, that also are contributing to it. So some of the hormones I want you to be familiar with is going to be insulin, leptin, orexin, and ghrelin. All right, ghrelin first. This is the hormone that causes hunger arousal. Okay, and so what happens is when the stomach is empty, all right, there's a signal that goes to the brain that says, hey, empty here, just like our car light comes on when we don't have any gas. Ghrelin says to the brain, hey, I'm hungry. You need to kind of pour some more energy into me, pour some food into me, because now I'm getting low on fuel. Okay. The next one is orexin. This is another hunger triggering hormone, and it is secreted by the hypothalamus. Next up, we have insulin. We've heard of that many times. This is secreted by the pancreas, and it controls our blood glucose. And if you can think about what we just talked about with glucose levels, when those levels are low, we feel hungry. Okay. All right. And then lastly, we have leptin. This is a protein hormone that is secreted by the fat cells, and when there is too much, it's an overabundance, it causes the brain to increase metabolism and therefore decrease hunger. So it's telling the brain, I have enough. Okay, you can go ahead and shut this down, saying that the hungry indicator is on because I have what I need. Just like when we put gas in our car, the light goes off because we have fulfilled at least to some minimum requirement that the indicator does not need to be on. Same thing, same difference. All right. Taste preferences. This is really just FYI. But you have taste preferences. We all do. Not just in certain countries, but even in our Western culture, we have taste preferences. In the summertime, we want cooler, lighter foods. We're not typically eating turkeys and pies and dressing and all the things we would eat in the wintertime. We're not eating that in the summer. We typically are eating salads and cool foods like ice cream and popsicles and maybe seafood, just things that are a little bit lighter than those heavy foods in the summertime versus the wintertime. And of course, as you go to different cultures, they have a very vast difference of what they prefer versus what a person that's a part of the Western culture prefers. Some of the more interesting shows that I've watched on television just kind of indicates how it is such a vast difference in the things that we prefer to eat. I was watching one show where they cook up like animals' blood, and where they're eating animals' testicles, or I saw where this person was eating a fermented egg that had a dead baby chick in it. That's an actual delicacy in that particular country. I'm not going to have a taste preference for that. Okay, just probably the smell alone would just kind of make me sick, make me ill. But in that particular country, that's normal. So they prefer that versus maybe coming to the Western culture preferring a burger, pizza. I mean, all the varieties of foods that we have, there's going to be a difference. Something also that I think is important to note is that particular countries that have very hot climates have spicier foods, and the reason for that is the preservation of that particular food, especially meats, so that they don't spoil so fast because of the intense heat temperature. So I always think that's a good note to mention to students, because sometimes we don't understand kind of the rationale behind some things when we don't understand kind of the whole global view of it. I certainly didn't know until I started researching information like that as it relates to the temperatures and countries and things like that. Some countries also have where it may not necessarily be very spicy, but very salty. That's another mechanism for preservation of certain foods as well. All right. you can just kind of read over that. These are just some FYI information. I think the only thing that I did want you to note, which is not necessarily on the slide itself, just kind of underneath the slide, but I want you to be familiar with BMI, what that stands for. BMI stands for the body mass index. And the body mass index, what it does is it measures your height to weight ratio. And based on your height to weight ratio, you will either fall into 3 categories: normal, overweight, or obese. Okay. Individuals that have a BMI of 30 or higher is considered obese. Those that have a 25 BMI or higher is considered overweight. And anything that's under 25 up to 24.999 is considered your normal weight. The only issues as of, I would say, lately, and lately is meaning like the last maybe 20 to 25 years, is that those that do like lift weights and things of that nature, they could still be seen based on the body mass index calculation as being overweight or even obese if they are extremely healthy person, but yet they lift weights. The weight from the muscle is also factored into your weight. And so it doesn't take into account that, hey, this person is this particular weight because this is muscle. Okay, this is muscle weight and not just kind of like fat weight. And so that's an issue with that as well. You have other indicators now in addition to BMI for measuring if a person is actually kind of healthy, overweight, or obese, because the BMI by itself just is a little bit too subjective because, like I said, it doesn't take into account some other factors. And if you're a short person, it's going to be unfortunate for you, especially if you're a little bit bigger than what's considered normal, but it doesn't mean that you're unhealthy. It's because you're short. The taller a person is, the more they get to gain. The shorter the person is, the less they're supposed to weigh, based on just how the BMI calculation is. All right, so let's talk about emotion. All right, so emotion. I want you to be familiar with how emotion is defined. Emotion is defined as a response of the whole organism involving 3 things: physiological arousal, expressive behaviors, and a conscious experience. All right, the physiological arousal is going to be the bodily arousal. Okay, that is an example of that would be like your heart pounding, you're sweating, pupils dilating, things like that. That's the physiological or bodily arousal. The expressive behaviors, an example with that would be a person that if you were afraid and you were walking, you start walking a little bit faster, or you start swinging, because you are in fear and trying to hit something to protect yourself. And then the conscious experience is both our thoughts and our feelings as well. And so there are some theories that we need to discuss that relate to emotion and how we process those emotions. So let's take a look at these theories. The first one is the James Lange theory. Okay, James Lange theory is arousal comes before emotion. Not many of us agree with James Lange theory. And let me give you an example of his theory. So for example, he would, based on, well, not he, because it's 2 different people, but based on this theory, the person would cry first and then feel sorry for what they did. So if they, did an action, or said something, or hit someone, or got into some type of trouble because of something that they did, instead of them logging the emotion in the brain as, oh, I'm sorry, and because I'm sorry and feel so bad for what I'm doing, I'll start crying, it's the complete opposite. I'm crying, oh, and I'm sorry, and really I'm sorry because I'm crying. That's the James Lange theory. Okay. The Cannon-Barrett theory is arousal and emotion occur simultaneously. And so with this is saying, okay, I heard 2 gunshots that were very, very close to me. My heart is pounding and I'm afraid. That's the simultaneous, okay? I'm afraid, my heart is pounding, okay? So my heart is pounding, that's the arousal. The emotion would be I'm afraid. That's occurring at the same time. And for the most part, a lot of people agree with either the Cannon-Barrett theory or the two-factor theory, okay, which is called the Schachter-Singer two-factor theory. With the two-factor theory, this involves, just like it's stated here, general arousal, conscious cognitive label equals the emotion. And so with this one, you'll typically see where it's a bit of a process where like your arousal is, so the arousal in that same example that I stated before, the arousal would be your heart is pounding, okay? And because your heart is pounding, that is triggering or fueling your emotion. And because that is occurring, that is channeling to your brain, you know, kind of intensifying what's going on, and you consciously experiencing that emotion and that arousal. Again, really the Cannon-Barrett theory is what typically occurs for the most part, but you do have some people that feel like the two-factor theory is more appropriate. All right. A part of the two-factor theory that I want to make mention of is the spillover effect. And with the spillover effect, we've seen it before. This is when you have a spillover of arousal. The arousal could be aggression, anger, screaming, crying, whatever, okay? The spillover arousal from one event to the next influencing a response. And when it's influencing a response, the spillover effect is typically seen in examples where you're talking about people. And so, for instance, if you had, if you were in or at a sports game and you had a group of opponents that are, you know, fans of the opposing teams, and they are arguing with one another. It may start off with one person for each side. Then it goes to, you know, some other people from that same team join in kind of in camaraderie, and they start arguing. And then it's a whole group of people that start kind of arguing, and it spilled over. The anger, the aggression, the rage, the, you know, the intense emotions just spill over from one person to a large group. And it can be an all-out brawl when it only started with 2 people. It spills over. So it's a spillover of emotion to other people. You can see this commonly also with musicians. If a person goes to a concert or things of that nature, you'll see a spillover effect there as well. All right, theories and physiology of emotion, just kind of FYI. All right. Basic emotions. Definitely want you to be familiar with the basic emotions, which are joy, interest, excitement, surprise, sadness, anger, disgust, contempt, fear, shame, and guilt. Okay, and these emotions are mostly present as early as infancy. So this is why we see the infants here kind of going through showing or displaying some of the emotions. Okay, so be familiar with those. Emotional arousal, this is just kind of how the body is affected. I'll try to make that a little bit larger for you all, but we actually saw something very close to this when we were, I believe, in chapter 6 with sensation and perception, and how the sympathetic and the parasympathetic work to arouse us, and the other works to calm us down in the face of danger or fear. All right. Gestures. Want you to make a note about gestures, and also facial expressions. Okay. With gestures, they vary from culture to culture. Okay. Gestures are meanings that vary among cultures, but outward signs of emotions are generally the same. They're universal. Okay. And what that means about them being universal is a smile in the United States typically means that a person is happy, glad, have some sense of joy. But if you go to another country, a smile should typically mean the same exact thing. And in most cases, I don't see why it wouldn't. That's where they're talking about that whole universal concept. A smile in the United States is not going to mean that you are a very angry person and that you're being disrespectful in a different culture, even in a different country. And so that's why they're saying it's generally the same universally, okay? But not in all. So a handshake in Western culture may be appropriate, may be a sign of respect or an invitation that I want to meet you or get to know you. In another country, it could depend on the sex that you are, of you doing that. That could be a sign of disrespect. That could be, it could be a number of things. It just kind of depends on what that culture is. And so you have to be very cognizant, very aware of how your culture varies and differs from another person. And how you get to know information about that is simply you ask, and you ask in a way that's very respectful, of course, because you want to understand and get to know much better how that culture views it, how they see it, and how you can operate much better in that culture so that you are still remaining respectful. Because otherwise, if you don't know, you have to ask so that you can know. I had a student before, a very, very respectful young man. He was my, at the time I was doing advisement, and every time we would meet, I would extend my hand for him to, for us to shake hands at the end of our meeting. Very nice meeting. Glad I was able to see you. Look forward to seeing you next time. And so he would get up without shaking my hand. And the first couple of times I assumed that he just didn't see my hand, but yet I was still aware of it to the point where I was purposeful every time I would see him to extend my hand to see if he was going to shake it. And so the next time that I saw him, which was probably about the third or fourth time after the whole handshake kind of situation happened, I put my hand out. And I put it out in a way where I was almost like, don't you leave here until you shake my hand, because you see my hand out here. I think I said, like, come on now, shake my hand. And so it was all, all in just great respect. And he laughed. He laughed when I did that. And he said, Miss Shine, I see your hand every time you put it out. He said, but because of my culture, I can't shake a woman's hand. It's a sign of disrespect. And I said, okay, got it. All you had to do was tell me that the first time and I would have understood. I said, we can do an air fist pump. That's fine with me, but I didn't understand why he kept kind of bypassing my hand. And he took that time to explain to me, and I was very appreciative of that, because I wouldn't want to do anything to be disrespectful to him or disrespectful to his culture. All of our cultures are very important to us. So it's always a good rule of thumb. If you don't know, ask the person, and ask them in a, in a respectful way. And if you don't, if you even think it's going to be disrespectful. All right, sorry I had to stop that video, but yes, so you ask in a respectful way so that we are aware of each other's cultures and that we're remaining respectful. All right, culture. I want you to make a quick note about the culture and their expressions. They differ very much on how emotion is expressed and how the differences even exist within the culture itself, because it can be a big difference within even that same culture. All right, and last, we have the differing cultures, and it said, do our faces speak different languages? No, it does not. Which face expresses disgust, anger, fear, happiness, sadness, surprise? Same thing with what I was saying. It's universal. This isn't meaning that I'm angry. This isn't meaning that I'm sad. Okay. This isn't meaning that I am surprised. It's universal from culture to culture. So just be familiar with that. And that concludes the remainder of 10.